in until they take a test to see whether or not they have the virus. But, you know, there's a point of absurdity. And I think what Rhode Island did is at that point of absurdity. And again, it's not even legal. So they're a neighboring state. I'm sure we're going to be able to work it out. But I think we need balance in all of this. I understand people are nervous and people are anxious. And
what they're talking about is they shut down an interstate going into Rhode Island. And anybody that didn't have a Rhode Island plate coming from New York was turned back. They basically done the same thing in North Carolina to a group of people that come out of Florida. Once more, a governor to shut down an interstate on account of trying to withstrain the coronavirus is going beyond what is considered normal in the pretense that we are the United States of America. Now, granted, whenever you're dealing with all those other little countries over there next to Germany and Europe and England and Spain and you go over to the Middle East and you got all them other little countries that's confined together, you know, that's on a different level of authority. Whenever you're talking about shutting down interstates, basically declaring martial law to the point of you having state troopers that will stop you. I mean, just this morning, WPSD in Channel 6 over here in Paducah, Kentucky, made reference to their governor that had said that for their citizens to be extremely cautious or careful in coming to Tennessee. He advised everybody in Kentucky not to go to Tennessee. And the reason why is because he was saying that the Tennesseans, the governor of the state of Tennessee, was not mandating the coronavirus towards keeping people at bay like they should, and because of it, stay out of Tennessee. Well, you keep in mind, the state of Kentucky has much more hills and hollers than really the state of Tennessee. And whenever you get to looking at the population, I believe we exceed Kentucky, give or take, about 3 million, if I'm not mistaken. 3, maybe 4 million people more than Kentucky. So we're going to have more risk. We're going to be considered a higher risk looking at it per capita, pertaining to how many citizens that you have in Kentucky versus how many citizens that you have in Tennessee. The last I looked in Tennessee was give or take around 7.5 million. I don't know, maybe 8 million. Some bunch of them may 11, maybe 7 million. But the last I looked, we was above and beyond Kentucky, give or take about 2 or 3 million people. I may be wrong about that assessment. But my point being is, it is getting so crucial with a lot of these governors. You know, like the governor down in Mississippi yesterday said, we're advising everybody just to maintain their livelihood and do whatever that they want to do. Well, yet no, the governor of the state of Mississippi, which is in Jackson, Mississippi, isn't but a two and a half hour drive from the capital in Louisiana. Louisiana right now is having an outbreak. So does that mean that the governor of the state of Mississippi is soon to put out an order to stop anybody coming from, you know, once you cross the Mississippi River, you're right there in Louisiana. What is it? Shreveport, Louisiana, up where Jimmy Swaggart's ministry is. That's where the capital is. I've been in there before. I've been in their capital. There's not too many states in the United States that I haven't been in their state capitals. Checking out their interests, checking out their history, checking out what they stand for, checking out what made them popular, regardless whether it be like in Oklahoma pertaining to oil. You come in Tennessee pertaining to farming. You know, some places is agriculture, some places is railroad, some places is river, pertaining to their history. You know, you go across the Mississippi River over to St. Louis. They have a lot of features over there in their capital in Jeffersonville pertaining to the river. The river is what put Missouri on the map. So you go to each and every, uh, go to, what is it, Nebraska or North Dakota or somewhere like that, and a bunch of cowboys, you know. Um, each state has its own little, what word am I looking for? Um, Qualities that makes that state that state. But at the same time, that's the whole primary purpose that we built interstates, that we don't have to go through checkpoints from one state to another state. Whenever it gets to the point that we have to do that, then we will officially be under martial law. And I don't think that the state governors want to enact a federal law pertaining to martial law based around the interstate traveling. I may be wrong. I don't know. But the point that I'm trying to make is this. It's getting crazy. Please listen to the governor here in New York. Please listen to what he's got to say. Because it's really weird. Listen.
This is a frightening situation, but we have to keep it in focus, and we have to keep the ideas and the policies we implement positive rather than reactionary and emotional.
So if you think that these actions are illegal, what are you prepared to do? Would you sue Rhode Island? Would you sue the federal government? What happens?
Well, I've sued the federal government many times, by the way, over the past few years. We have had quite a number of policy decisions. I do not believe it's going to come to that on this. Again, I've been speaking to the president. This would be a declaration of war on states, a federal declaration of war. And it wouldn't just be New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Next week.
A federal declaration of war. Man, oh man, I bet that perked up a lot of our enemies' ears over in the Middle East pertaining to the Taliban, pertaining to ISIS, pertaining to all these other countries that hate our guts, that's already sworn off towards wanting to destroy us. Because if they can get us fighting amongst ourselves to the point that a civil war breaks out, then they have basically accomplished their objective by taking America over and never firing a shot. Because once we become so weakened at the knees, to the point that we're fighting each other, and once we use up all our bullets with all our guns, then the enemy will basically just walk over here and take us over. And that would be what the enemy would love to see happen, regardless whether it was the enemy of one country or the enemy of another country. You keep in mind, we as American citizens, as a Christian society, has been under attack ever since that we have formed our government over here, the State of the Union. We have been under attack in some form or fashion. I mean, if it wasn't the Confederacy that was trying to take down America pertaining to the Union, it was other entities that was after the brass ring. Everybody wanted to take a bite out of America towards saying, we're in control. No, we're in control. No, we're in control. The fact of the matter is the Native American people are still the people that's in control of America. They may not admit it up front. They may not boast about it. But the fact of the matter is the Native American people in America still hold predominance over the land mass and the water mass here in the United States of America. The red man done what the white man wanted him to do. The red man was told that he needed to colonize. The red man was told that he was uncivilized. The red man was told that if he done this, 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 and this, that this, and this was going to happen. We still hold the white man to those agreements and to those promises to this day. And it's not a matter of it being tribal. If it was tribal, then you would have, I don't know how many, I think it's something like 1,200 different tribes that hold different dominions in different areas. You're liable to have 12, 15, 25 tribes just in one state, like the state of New Mexico. It probably has 25 different tribal groups in there pertaining to their rights, as well as the Spanish people in New Mexico. Okay? But this, what they're talking about here, interstate travel, that is on a broader scale, to the point that it doesn't matter if you're green, yellow, purple, blue, black, white. It doesn't matter if you're a cancer patient or you have diabetes or whatever. You cannot shut the interstates down under the pretense of a declaration of a war. Now, if there was actually a war, as far as a civil war, to where you had something that was occurring on the same level of the Confederacy going up against the Union, then that would be different. Then you could shut the interstates down. A matter of fact, the president has the power that he can shut the interstates down in the condition of a war. He can turn the interstates into a airplane hangar. That was the whole purpose. I think it was, wasn't Roosevelt, I think it was some other president, may have been Roosevelt, I don't know, that wanted to widen the roads. He didn't want to widen the roads necessarily because he was a visionary in understanding that America was going to be overpopulated and we was all of a sudden going to be driving all these automobiles out of nowhere. They widened the roads primarily for airplanes to be able to land and fly, take off. So under that declaration of a conflict, a major conflict, yes, the President of the United States has the power to shut down any interstate on a federal mass level. But not a governor. Not over something like this. Now, if it was bloodshed, shooting, killing, uprising, town done went crazy, everybody was going berserk, turning it into nothing but a bloodbath, then under the declaration of war, the governor has the power to shut the interstate down. They could shut the interstate down. And I ain't just talking about shut it down because of a wreck. I'm talking about shut it down where nobody could get in and out of their state. Of course, you always have these private people with all these private little airplanes, you know. And then you got rivers, and you got tributaries that go off into the waterways. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can get over from one area to one state to another area without having to go down the interstate. It would be almost next to impossible. And the only reason why that it would even be thought of would be under the pretense of something just absolutely horrifying. And I'm not saying that the coronavirus isn't horrifying, because it is. But what we're dealing with here is a supernatural, I call it a supernatural, due to the fact that you can't see it with the human eye. But what we're dealing with here is something that is microscopic. It's a billionth the size of a human being. And as far as we know, it may have already went airborne. So all this stuff that we're doing right now towards taking all these precautionary measures, may be senseless to begin with. If this thing is floating around in the upper atmosphere to the point that it's already done swept over America, sweeping over Russia, sweeping over this. If this contagious disease, I've said this before and I'll say it again, everybody wants to keep patting South Korea on the back. Oh, look what kind of good job South Korea done. Oh, they was this. Oh, they was that. Oh, they was this. Has anybody ever thought that maybe South Korea was already on to what was fixing to be unleashed into society? I don't know if it was the South Koreans or the North Koreans, but I truly believe that it is a strong possibility that somebody has engineered this disease. And if the truth be known, they probably thickened the plot a little bit thicker than what they thought, and now it's coming back and it's haunting even them. Because nobody is going to be exempt from this coronavirus, COVID-19, that is now spreading all over the globe. But listen once more to this governor right here. I'll back it up where you can get the most part of what he says. Right there.
Habits.
Well, I've sued the federal government many times, by the way, over the past few years. We've had quite a number of policy decisions. I do not believe it's going to come to that on this. Again, I've been speaking to the president. This would be a declaration of war on states, a federal declaration of war. And it wouldn't just be New York, New Jersey, Connecticut. Next week it would be Louisiana with New Orleans, and the next week after that it would be Detroit and Michigan, and it would run all across the nation. And I don't think the president is looking to start a lot of wars with a lot of states just about now for a lot of reasons. With Rhode Island, they're a neighboring state. I think what they did is wrong. I think it was reactionary. I think it was illegal. But we'll work it out amicably, I'm sure. We have conversations going back and forth. No state should be using police to prohibit interstate travel in any way. No state should be able to say, I'm going to use my police to make sure you don't come in with a license plate. By the way, you're in Rhode Island. What if you travel to New York and you travel back to Rhode Island? Do you get stopped and you can't re-enter Rhode Island? You know how many people from Rhode Island come to New York to do business? So we have to be a little smart in all of these policies.
I want to ask you more about the situation specifically in New York, because the stories that we're hearing from hospital workers are not good. We see the lines outside places like Elmhurst. What is the status when it comes to ventilators in New York State? Because I know that's been one of the big issues and of concern for you.
Well, the ventilators, which, by the way, before this situation, nobody really gave a second thought to ventilators. What has happened, one of the peculiar situations with this disease is it's a respiratory disease. It affects the lungs very badly, and people who are acutely ill with this virus, they all need a ventilator. And they're on these ventilators much longer than most people are on ventilators with other diseases. So you have more people needing ventilators, and they are on them longer, which increases the need for the ventilators. And everybody is trying to get ventilators. You have 50 states bidding against each other to get ventilators. You have 50 states competing with the federal government to buy ventilators. You have countries around the world trying to get ventilators. So we're trying to do the best we can. We're acquiring as many as we can. There's a new technology that we're using that splits, they call it splitting, where one ventilator can do two people. We're implementing that procedure across the state.
Well, once more, I just heard this morning that under normal circumstances, that would have been the grounds to have pulled a doctor away from practicing medicine. Because it would have been absolutely unheard of to have put two people on the same ventilator. Now, they're starting to do it not only up there, but in other places. I don't know what the volume of a ventilator can do. I don't know if it can take care of one person 2 people, 3 people, a dozen people? I don't know. But I'm just telling you, under normal circumstances, if a doctor was to have put 2 people on a ventilator, the same ventilator, it would have been grounds to have disbarred that doctor from practicing any more medicine. I don't know what they're doing about it now. They may be waiving certain conditions because we're dealing with a crisis. And hopefully, if hooking 2 people up on a ventilator will save both people's lives, then the law probably needs to be waived. Because we're not dealing with normal circumstances whenever you have a pandemic. We have a pandemic. We have a crisis that is... We're basically under siege. And we need to look at it at that. I mean, whenever you have 113 cases here in America and over almost 1,900 people that's died since they've been tallying this thing up, you got over 30,000 people in the world that has died. 30,000. 30,000 people. That would be like almost half of all the citizens in Jackson, Tennessee. It may be half. Those in Madison County, south of here. Could you only imagine if you took out half the citizens in one city, in one town, all at one time? How spooky and how ghostly that it would be in your grocery stores and your Lowe's and your Walmarts and your dental and your eye care and your hospitals and your clinics and your churches and your mechanic shops and your body shops and all the other retailers that's selling all kinds of stuff. Your Sonic, your Burger King, your McDonald's, your fast food industry it would be Twilight. It would be just like walking into a Twilight Zone movie. If you took out half the people in Jackson, Tennessee overnight, it would be like walking into a Twilight Zone movie. Most people's minds couldn't handle it. It would be so bizarre. Kind of like whenever I was working the Katrina damage. And I wound up down, I think it was called the 9th Ward, to where you had these nice homes, looked like probably 150, maybe 250 to maybe $250,000, $500,000 homes. Just block after block after block after block after block, and you could tell that they was nice houses, nice driveways, nice road structure, but there was no one there. Everybody had gone. They had vanished. Whenever I experienced that, it was like experiencing a literal Twilight Zone movie. Because it was block after block after block that was like that. All the houses had become flooded, and now because of the mow, they was considered unfit to be around or to live in. So we're dealing with situations unlike any other that we have dealt with in the past. And once more, it corresponds right up with the Bible that says that we will see things and experience things here upon the earth and see things in the heavens such as we've never seen before. Whenever you think of heavens pertaining to that scripture, you automatically think of the solar system. No, he was talking about the weather events. Extremely too much rain. Extremely not enough rain. Extremely dry. Extremely wet. We will see signs in the heavens and upon the earth such as man has not seen before in the last days. So that is just a stamp of approval, of authenticity, verifying we are in the last days, especially whenever you combine it with all this other stuff that we're seeing right now that's busting loose here in America with all all the controversy over the highways. And like I said, somebody was going to Florida, to North Carolina. They got stopped going over the bridge and was told to turn around. Told to turn around. Unbelievable. Perilous times.
We're doing the best we can to move the people who need the ventilators to the places that have the ventilators. But that is one of the great logistical problems with this entire situation. The problem is you want to flatten that curve so you don't overwhelm the hospital system. The hospital system, its beds, its staff, but then its equipment, and at the top of the equipment list are the ventilators.
What is the latest on the fatality rate in your state?
It dropped today. It is still going, it's still, the overall line is still up. Today was a drop. We're not sure if it's a one-day drop. We tested 17,000 people overnight, 7,000 hospitalizations, but we still see it going up. The possible apex by the numerical projections has us needing 140,000 hospital beds and about 40,000 ventilators, which is a very big number that would overwhelm the healthcare system. So we're trying to get down the curve, get down the spread of infections, and at the same time ramp up that hospital capacity, God forbid that actually happens. And we're getting very creative in doing that. We're opening temporary hospitals in locations across the state. So we're doing everything we can to increase the hospital capacity and flatten the curve at the same time.
I hear what you're saying about the reaction in terms of providing the space, having the resources to deal with an influx and a rush of more and more patients. If you are completely against a federal lockdown, how do you get it under control?
You get it under control the way we're operating. Look, there's not a lot of options here, right? Reduce the spread, quote unquote, flatten the curve. That's what they all talk about. We've taken every action you can take there. Nobody can go to work except essential workers. Reduce density in places, close the restaurants, close the gyms, no gatherings. So you reduce the spread. You increase the hospital capacity. You test. We're doing more tests than any state in the United States, more per capita than China or South Korea. So you isolate the positive. And part of it is it runs its course. All you're hoping is that you slow down that spread of infection. You drop that curve to a level that you can treat in the hospitals. And that's what we're doing. We're anticipating an apex of that curve, the high point, to be anywhere from 14 to 21 days. So that's really the essential moment for us, when you get to that high point. And they say that's 14 to 21 days. With any luck at all, after that high point, the number of cases start to drop.
Okay, Governor Andrew Cuomo, you've taken a lot of time with us. Thank you very much for the conversation. Wishing you lots of luck. Be well.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. As millions of Americans struggle with not only the health risk here, but also the economic burden caused by coronavirus, President Trump has signed a $2 trillion stimulus package. What does that mean for you? An economist will break down your questions next.
Of metal, plastic, or paper, and it recycles it automatically. And this is extraordinary.
Yesterday, you may recall, Prime Minister Boris Johnson became the first world leader to report he is tested positive. Meanwhile, in Germany, where 325 people have died of the virus, Chancellor Angela Merkel's chief of staff says Germany won't ease its restrictions on movement until at least the 20th of April. Germany is not the first European country to extend their lockdown. And finally, we go to China, where the pandemic began in December, and people are now back on the streets again. A plane from China just landed in Spain carrying a cargo of some 4 million face masks. As new cases in China dry up, Beijing has gone on a PR offensive, John, providing those medical supplies, trying to win hearts and minds in Europe, and I can tell you that those face masks are very welcome. John?
Ryan Chilcote in London, thank you. More team coverage on the coronavirus crisis up next. How authorities in Colorado are protecting healthcare workers on the front lines of this pandemic.
I'm working to make connections of a different kind.
Development.
After striking and killing.
See what they're working for.
That wall cloud, and there's curtains of rain behind it. Blake's in the right spot to see this. He's on the east side of things, and as you look west, that's where you can find the clearest view. And again, if there's there could be a funnel that produces that comes out of.
Sure it.
There are reports that the governor of Rhode Island has ordered that all vehicles with New York state license plates be stopped when entering that state. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I think that's a reactionary policy. I'm concerned about people with the virus coming into my state, right? So I think that's a reactionary policy, and I don't think that's legal. And we're talking to Rhode Island now. If they don't roll back that policy, I'm going to sue Rhode Island because that clearly is unconstitutional.
Per day. Let's bring in Dr. David Howe, who is working on solutions and vaccines that can normally take up to 5 years, now trying to do it in just over a year for COVID-19. He is CEO of the Aaron Diamond AIDS Research Center at Columbia University. He was one of the leading HIV/AIDS researchers in 1980s and helped governments battle SARS in the early 2000s. Dr. Howe, thanks for being with us. You and I spoke exactly a week ago, and I first of all wanted to get your thoughts on what has changed in the last week that gives you some inspiration, some hope that we may be finding solutions or getting closer to solutions.
Well, I'm certainly inspired by the scientists around the globe making major efforts to come up with drugs, antibodies, or vaccine. And the tremendous dedication is telling me that we ultimately will find a solution. But we have to now do this in a short period of time. In contrast to the usual 5 to 10 year period. We need to get that done in a year, hopefully at most 2 years, given the urgency.
I started by talking about tests. You actually have one of those tests with you there. The okay by the FDA, is that good news or is it great news? And can you show us what one of those tests looks like?
Yes, I can. This is just one of many tests now available that you could prick one's finger and drop 1 drop of blood and then read the results in approximately 10-15 minutes to detect whether you have antibodies against COVID-19. Now, we have to remember that all the testing that's been done so far largely detect the virus, in particular the viral RNA. But this test will look for antibodies. So it will take some time for an infected person to develop the antibodies, typically more than a week. So it serves a different purpose. The previous test would detect virus. This would detect immune reaction to the virus. And both are extremely useful in tracking the epidemic and trying to get a clearer picture so we could respond properly.
More data. Dr. Howe, we've been hearing the reports of using plasma from those who have recovered from COVID-19. Will that work, and how does that work if it were to?
Well, obviously, recovered patients develop antibodies directed to the virus, and the hope is that you could use plasma, which contain the antibody, from convalescent cases and administer to folks who are severely ill from COVID-19. In China, they had collected something like 300 liters of such plasma and administered to 250 infected individuals. But we're actually still waiting for the readout from that experiment. Obviously, as the surge of patients is occurring, many places in the U.S. are now in the process of trying to collect plasma from convalescent cases and hoping that such an approach could be useful.
And as we look at the evolution, you may have heard the reporting at the top of the hour here. We're looking at Italy, we're looking at the cases in the United States. The question is, when will we hit that peak, right? That'll help us understand a lot, as you have been telling me and others so many times. The governor of New York is saying 14 to 21 days before we hit the peak. How would you agree with him in terms of his estimations?
Well, I don't have a clear answer for that. From what I could see, we're still on the upswing of this exponential growth curve, and I don't think he's far off. I hope it's shorter than that, but time will tell. I think we're hoping to see several days of plateau in terms of new infections each day. Once we see that, I think we could be sure that the epidemic will gradually come under control and the curve being flattened.
15 seconds here, Dr. Howe. How is you and your team doing in terms of finding a treatment or vaccine?
Well, we're working very hard, but as you know, this is a process that requires time. I think we and other groups have small hits, but they need to be further investigated and further optimized.
Well, Dr. Howe, keep on swinging. We support your team of researchers and you in trying to help us with trying to find treatments for COVID-19. Dr. David Howe, appreciate your time.
Thank you, Richard.
All righty. While nearly 2,000 people have died from coronavirus in the U.S., death tolls in some other countries are far lower. Can we learn from what they've done? Up next, we'll talk to the man who played a critical role in responding to another American disaster about what we could learn from containment models abroad. You're watching MSNBC.